Part 1. Wounding. The ghost at my family's table. They always said I couldn't handle it, couldn't take orders, couldn't stomach authority, couldn't survive structure. They said I cracked under pressure, that I withered, that I quit. And they said all this right in front of me, like I wasn't there, like I wasn't real. Just a shadow, a failed silhouette of the golden girl they raised. At every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every 4th of July barbecue, they toasted to my sister Carrara's military promotions like they were reading bullet points off a resume. Top 10% in her class, 2 medals this year, fastest tactical assessment response in her unit. Her name rang out like a hymn. And me? I was the silent clause in the family sentence. The cautionary tale, the dropout, the one who used to be at ROC, then just used to be. No one asked why I left. No one cared what that silence meant. They called me weak for walking away. They never stopped to ask if maybe I was the strongest one of us all. My name is Cassidy Ror, and the only reason they never saw what I became is because I was never meant to be seen. I built a war without a uniform, a career without recognition, a purpose in the shadows. They said I didn't belong in the military, so I became something even the military doesn't officially admit exists. I went dark, and the only reason they know now is because I let them. It happened on a blistering New Mexico morning. I'd flown in on a 4 a.m. red-eye under a civilian ID, checked into a roadside motel, tossed on a black windbreaker, tactical slacks, and clipped a visitor badge to my chest. Unremarkable. Nondescript. I looked like someone's HR rep or supply contractor, not the woman who used to lead blacklisted recovery units behind enemy lines. The training yard spread out like a desert mirage. Cadets moved in rhythm, boots cracking on red dust. I sat 3 rows back in the bleachers, just another face in the crowd. I didn't flinch, I didn't smile, I just watched. Then I saw her. Carrara. Lieutenant Cassidy Ror. My little sister. Sharp-chinned, back straight, jaw clenched in that perfectly drilled posture. She barked out orders like she was born to command. Her voice echoed across the field. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and decided I was still beneath notice, but someone else did. Sergeant Mason Frey. He stopped mid-circuit, eyes locked with mine. 1 heartbeat, 2. Then he moved. Sharp, intentional. Every boot step of his approach struck like a gavel. Cadets turned. Whispers spread. And when he stood 2 feet from me, he saluted. "Commander Ror, ma'am. I wasn't informed you'd be observing today." Silence. Not just on the field, but in me. It was the silence of a world tilting on its axis. Carrara's jaw dropped. I didn't break eye contact. "At ease, Sergeant," I said calmly. "I'm off duty. Keep this quiet." But it was too late. The base was already awake, and my family was about to find out the ghost they buried had built a legacy beneath their feet. The invitation came like a command, not "we miss you," not "how are you," just "come home Sunday. Celebration for Carrara. Wear something normal." Like I was still 19 and living under their roof. I hadn't been home in nearly 7 years. Not since I left without slamming the door because I wanted the silence to echo louder than a scream. But I went. Not for them. For her. For the little sister who once cried on my bunk bed when she scraped her knee before she became the family's monument to success. The house was unchanged. Cracked driveway, flickering porch light, mailbox still tilted left like my father's politics and my mother's disapproval. Inside, it smelled like nostalgia and cinnamon. Everything was decorated like a military awards banquet. Banner, slideshow, pamphlets with her face on every page. There wasn't a single photo of me. I wore a gray blouse, black slacks, not a statement, just enough to pass as a ghost. Still, I felt their eyes. The way you feel humidity, oppressive and everywhere. My dad didn't even stand. "So, what are you doing these days?" he asked casually, already glancing back at the slideshow. Before I could answer, he launched into Carrara's latest accomplishments. My aunt chuckled from the buffet. "Didn't you used to wait tables at Applebee's?" I smiled. "Cool, precise." "I'm better at serving now," I said. The words were gentle. The knife wasn't. Then came the expected moment. "Ass, could you grab some forks?" No one else moved. No one looked ashamed. It was automatic. I got the forks, I poured the water, and when I returned, there was no seat for me. All place cards taken. My mother blinked like she forgot I existed. "There's a folding chair out back, by the grill." So I sat outside in the wind and propane like a waitress waiting to clock out. They thought I crumbled. They didn't know I'd been running a war they weren't smart enough to notice. They thought I broke. They didn't know I disappeared on purpose. And I never stopped watching. Part 2, Rage. I didn't vanish. Didn't. I was erased. That metal chair on the porch, cold, rusted at the edges, dug into my back, but I didn't move. Not because I didn't feel the ache, but because I'd spent years learning to endure sharper pain in silence. They thought I was still that fragile girl who left in the middle of the night. But they didn't know what happened after, the truth? I didn't vanish. I was erased. After that last drill at Row C, after I froze during a night maneuver and the commander called me civilian material, the shame was a sickness. I remember my bunkmates laughing. I remember someone tossing their boots down beside me with a smirk, whispering, "Maybe waitressing's more your speed." I left before the sun came up. No medal, no closure, just a duffel bag full of silence and shaking hands. What they don't know is that I walked into a civilian building that same week, handed over every trace of identity I had, and signed a contract I was never allowed to keep a copy of. They called it the Echo Civilian Defense Program. Unlisted, unacknowledged, operated beneath even the department's quietest branches. We weren't soldiers. We were ghosts with assignments. People you never hear about unless something goes wrong. And even then, it's never our names in the papers. I was 24 when Cassidy Ror ceased to exist in every searchable system. No driver's license, no tax record, no address. I was a phantom by design. The missions weren't cinematic. No action music, no victory flag waving in the wind. Just damp field gear, encoded briefings, and a simple rule. If you're caught, no one's coming. I didn't rise through Echo because I was fearless. I rose because I stopped needing to be seen. I changed languages like outfits, modified accents, learned to disappear between dialects and disappear inside towns. I memorized floor plans in under an hour, could scan a room for entry points faster than I used to scan a menu. In year 3, I took a bullet for an asset we weren't supposed to be protecting. The scar is still there, a ghost's proof that even ghosts bleed, but back home? I was still the one who gave up. They used my name like a warning. Don't pull a Cassidy. My sister probably heard it every time she missed a mark in drills, every time she stumbled on protocol. Don't be like her. She had no idea I was leading strategic operations by 36. Recruitment protocols, international intel scrubs, recovery mapping. I wasn't in the room where things happened. I was the room. But none of that mattered at my family's dinner table. There, I was still the dropout who once folded shirts at Macy's. That night, as I sat outside breathing propane fumes, the secure device stitched into my coat lining vibrated once. Not a buzz you'd confuse with a phone. A silent tick only the trained would recognize. I slipped my hand into the seam and pulled out the slim black rectangle. Directive received. Observer mode. Echo protocol. Passive scan. Fort Garnett. I almost laughed. That base, Fort Garnett, that's where Carrara was stationed. I wasn't back because I missed them. I was back because the world still needed me, even if my family never would. The next morning, I arrived at Fort Garnett under clearance. Civilian analyst, rotating passcode, serial badge entry. 3 people on base could decrypt that ID, no rank, no uniform. Just the same neutral face I'd worn for a decade. From the edge of the observation range, I watched her. Carrara. Flawless. Focused. Her chin lifted, her spine pulled tight. Her unit stood behind her in perfect cadence, drilling under the red-hot sky. She didn't see me, but he did. Sergeant Mason Frey. I'd read his file more times than he could guess. Every disciplinary note, every psych eval, every field efficiency rating. The man was precision incarnate. He was cutting through rows of recruits when he suddenly stopped. His head tilted, eyes narrowed, right at me. There was a second, just one, where his brain tried to process what his eyes were seeing. Then the shift, a subtle straightening, a different kind of recognition. He marched over, and again, in front of half the base, he saluted. "Commander Ror, ma'am, I wasn't informed you'd be observing today." The air went still. Carrara's head snapped toward us, her eyes locked on mine. Her hands faltered. Her training rifle clattered to the ground like a dropped truth. Whispers broke out behind her. "Wait, her sister's a commander?" I didn't blink. "Off duty, Sergeant?" I said quietly. "No announcement necessary." But it was too late. Whispers spread like wildfire. I left after 15 minutes. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew exactly what kind of storm I'd just lit. That night she couldn't sleep. I know that look, jaw twitching, eyes unfocused. The face of someone whose inner reality just shattered. Her bunkmate snored, but Carrara stayed frozen. Eventually she unzipped the old gym bag I'd given her last year. I'd passed it off like it was snacks from a road trip. She'd never checked it. Until now. In the side pocket was a flat steel drive, brushed metal, unmarked. She plugged it into her tablet. The screen blinked, then flared. Access request. Echo terminal clearance civilian proxy detected. She froze. She typed in her cadet ID, low-level clearance, enough to open a window, not enough to survive what it showed. Text scrolled too fast to process. Files that should never have appeared flickered past. Then, access logged. Oversight alert triggered. The screen went black. She yanked the drive out like it burned her. She thought she'd found a relic. She'd triggered a tripwire. 2:43 a.m. My secure line buzzed. Unauthorized breach. Internal node ping. Tag R or A1. I was out of bed in under 5 seconds. That tag, my original one, had been buried years ago. Scrubbed clean. No living person had access. Except 2. Me and my sister. Part 3, Hope. You touched a wall that was never meant to fall. 45 minutes later, I was seated across from Major Evelyn Shaw in a silent, windowless room known unofficially as the Vault. No clocks, no casual glances, just data and consequences. She slid a sleek data pad toward me, eyes unreadable behind her steel-rimmed glasses. "Commander Ror," she said, her voice sharper than the metal badge on her chest. "The breach came from Fort Garnett. Clearance trail leads directly to a legacy Echo drive. A drive tied to your original tag, Ror A1. I didn't flinch. "It wasn't me," I said. "That," she replied, "is exactly what worries us." There were no accusations, no raised voices, just implications, measured silence, cold trust hanging by a thread. She handed me a 48-hour trace directive. Silent flag, full diagnostic access, no official report. But I didn't need the clearance, I already knew. Back in my quarters, I decrypted the drive's metadata manually. It was sloppy, which was the first giveaway. I hadn't written those security trails, but I recognized the drive's signature. I remembered it from 2 years ago, the brushed steel, the etched grid, the weight of it. It was hers. The one I'd slipped into Carrara's gym bag the last time I saw her, when I pretended to be just a sister stopping by with snacks and memories. She hadn't known. Not really. Until now. And now, unknowingly, she'd awakened something I buried a long time ago. Something that wasn't meant to wake at all. This wasn't just about her curiosity. It was about what she triggered, and who wanted it triggered. I didn't storm into her barracks. That would have been for show. Instead, I had her escorted to the Echo Operations Wing. The room was sterile. No windows, one chair, one overhead bulb. Designed to make even the innocent feel guilty. She walked in like a cadet should, shoulders high, spine straight, shoes gleaming. But when she saw me sitting there with Sergeant Frey behind me, her mask cracked. "Sit!" She obeyed, but her fingers clenched the edge of the metal seat like it was her only anchor. "You don't need to explain yet," I said, "but you do need to understand." I held up the drive. "That's not a training tool. That's a federal security node tied to Echo." Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean to—" "I know, but meaning doesn't undo damage." Her voice dropped. "What did I touch?" "You didn't open a door, Kara," I said quietly. "You kicked a hole in a wall that was never meant to fall." She shook her head, stunned. "But I thought Echo was just rumor." I almost smiled. "We designed it to feel that way." She glanced down. "I just wanted to know who you were, why you left, why you disappeared." I studied her. The girl who used to trail behind me in pigtails and scraped knees. The woman who now barked commands at rising cadets. "You ever think to ask?" She blinked. "No," I said, because no one did." Frey folded his arms. "If she screws this up, Commander, both of you are finished." I nodded. "I'm aware." I turned back to her. "I'm not reporting you." Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because you're going to help fix this." She hesitated, then nodded. Not as a soldier, but as a sister. A silent one. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected bloom behind my ribs. Hope. We started with the logs. She sat beside me in the analyst chair, shoulder to shoulder, the way we used to be on family road trips, fighting over playlists. Now, we were combing digital trails and command traces. Sergeant Frey stood watch behind us, silent and alert. At first it looked like a shallow breach, the kind caused by sloppy curiosity. But something didn't sit right. There was a trace signature, one I hadn't seen in 5 years, encrypted, buried, masked in a dormant backup node. A name flashed on screen, Curtis Vaughn. Her brow furrowed. "Who's that?" I leaned back slowly, my blood felt cold. "Former contractor. Tactical interface dev on Echo Sims. Removed after I flagged unauthorized code injections." Frey looked up. "Didn't he vanish?" "He did," I said, "but not before embedding legacy traps in the system." Carrara's lips parted. "So this wasn't an accident?" "No," I whispered. "This was bait." I scanned the logs again. Vaughn's code had been dormant, until now, until she touched it, until I returned to the base. "You didn't trigger a breach," I told her. "You triggered him." For the first time since I was 25, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Vaughn hadn't just planted malware. He had designed a digital noose with my name on the slipknot. One pull from the wrong hands, and the history I'd buried would hang me. He wanted me exposed. He wanted revenge. And the perfect door? Carrara. Not a threat. Just curious enough. Just connected enough to me. Just innocent enough to make it believable. But now that she knew, we weren't on opposite sides anymore. We were aligned. We were a threat to him. She turned toward me, fire starting to rise behind her eyes. "Then let's close the door." Part 4. Heartbreak. He tried to rewrite my past using my sister. The tribunal chamber felt colder than any black site I'd ever operated in. Rows of tightly arranged chairs, walls paneled in dark wood, probably to mimic courtrooms, familiar spaces where justice is expected. But this wasn't justice, this was optics. A performance staged for people who needed to believe the system always knew what it was doing. Curtis Vaughn stood at the front like he was auditioning for a promotion. He wore a plain gray suit. Civilian. Polished. Harmless. But the arrogance in his posture screamed otherwise. He held a thick folder of redacted documents and a smugness that turned my stomach. "This," he said, tapping a paragraph blacked out with official ink, "documents Commander Ror's failure to report civilian casualties during Operation Halbert." A few heads turned. No one spoke. He continued, voice smooth. "There were deaths. 2 civilians. Unverified intel. Commander Ror authorized the perimeter sweep without full confirmation." His eyes flicked to mine. The implication was clear. She got people killed. She hid it. She's unfit. The colonel on the panel turned to me. "Commander?" I didn't blink. I didn't breathe deeply. I didn't need to. I'd already buried this once. I opened my folder and handed the laminated directive to the clerk. She passed it up the row. "This is the original order," I said. "Signed and time-stamped. Curtis Vaughn authorized that sweep." Whispers. The colonel examined the document. "His name's on the line," I added. "His directive, his clearance override. He cut the comms to prevent objection." Curtis's jaw twitched. Then Frey stepped forward. "Permission to submit audio." The colonel nodded. A low click. Then crackling speakers. My voice filled the chamber, 5 years old but clear. "Hold fire. Possible civilian presence. Wait for recon confirmation." Silence. And then... her. Carrara rose from the bench. She looked nothing like the cadet from 3 days ago. She was steel. In her hands, the echo logs, the ones we'd traced to Vaughn. "He didn't just authorize the sweep," she said, voice steady. "He planted code to alter access records, rewrote timelines, used fake contractor IDs. When I accessed my sister's drive, it triggered a failsafe, one designed to frame her." The words hung like gravity. "He didn't just set her up. He waited for years, betting someone close would stumble into his trap. He used me as bait. He used her as the trigger. And all of it, every line of it, was done to make it look like I had something to hide. Because that's what cowards do. They rewrite history to avoid their own chapters." The colonel leaned back, his eyes heavy, his breath slow. There was no gavel, no dramatic reveal, just a quiet nod. "You're cleared, Commander." That was it. No applause, no headline. Just the truth. Standing on its own. Later, outside the chamber, Carrara stood next to me in the courtyard. She held a small silver badge, freshly pinned. Not of rank, of trust. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "Not yet. I want to deserve it." I didn't say a word. I just pulled her in and held her tighter than I had in years. Not as her sister, but as someone who had been invisible for too long, finally seen by the one person who mattered most. Before I boarded the jet, I left her a note, slipped into her locker. Just one line. "If you ever forget who you are, start here." Part 5, Liberation. I was never meant to be seen, until now. The jet hummed beneath me like a distant memory. Quiet, unshakable, familiar. I didn't look back. Not at the base, not at the tribunal, not at the courtyard where my sister stood with a badge she hadn't earned, but was finally willing to fight for. For most of my adult life, I believed disappearing was my greatest skill. I became an expert at erasure, a master of shadows. I thought my worth was in my invisibility, how well I could fold myself into the folds of a mission, a persona, a protocol. But sitting there, staring into the darkness above the clouds, I realized I didn't choose to be invisible. I was taught to be. Taught by a family that praised obedience but never curiosity. That applauded medals and memorized speeches but dismissed the kind of strength that grows in silence. Taught that emotions were distractions. That fear was weakness. That stepping away meant failure. And for years I believed them. Even after I became someone who could move whole networks with a single order, I still believed I didn't count. That I was only worthy if I stayed quiet. But something shifted when I saw Kara stumble in front of those cadets. When I saw the rifle slip from her hands and the truth crack across her face. She hadn't just seen me in that moment. She saw everything she never asked about. All the years she let them shape her understanding of who I was. And she doubted it for the first time. Doubt, when it's honest, is a form of liberation. So I started doubting too. Not myself, but the stories I'd been told. Weeks passed. Fort Garnett quieted. Vaughn's name was sealed inside a classified report and tucked into a digital vault he would never be allowed near again. And I returned to the only thing I knew how to do, the work. But I wasn't the same. I no longer sat behind layers of encryption and hierarchy like armor. I no longer needed to. People started calling me something else, visible. Not in the way Kara was on posters and banners, but in how I walked into rooms, in how I stood without shrinking. Major Evelyn Shaw, cold as she was, nodded to me differently now. Not just as a peer, but as someone who had been tested off record and survived. And Frey, he never said much, but one day during a field drill, he handed me a dossier and said, "Your sister started commanding like someone who's been burned." I glanced up. "Good," I said. He nodded. Because we both knew, fire makes the steel, not the applause. One night, months later, I got a secure ping. Not from command, from Kara. It was a short message, just 6 words. "Heard your voice in the chamber." I didn't reply, I didn't need to. She had finally heard me, and that was enough. I used to believe I had no legacy, no pictures at the table, no slideshow at the banquet, no chair reserved at the ceremony. But that wasn't true. Legacy isn't what gets printed, it's what you pass quietly into the hands of someone who might one day need it. And I had passed mine to her, not through blood, not through orders, but through truth, through choice. And now she'd have to carry it. But unlike me, she wouldn't be alone. Because I was done disappearing. Part 6, Healing. I don't need to be loud to be seen. There was no big ceremony, no formal send-off. Just me standing outside an unmarked building in Arlington, sipping bad coffee in a paper cup, the morning sun crawling across the stone. I watched a group of new analysts arrive. Young, sharp-eyed, still flush with ambition. None of them knew who I was. And that was fine. It was the first time in my life I didn't feel bitter about it. Because being unseen no longer felt like a curse. It felt like choice. I chose the silence now. Not because I didn't have a voice, but because I finally understood when to use it. It took me nearly a decade to learn that you don't have to shout to make an impact. Sometimes, quiet changes the room. Quiet is strategic. Quiet is aware. Quiet is what kept me alive. But now, that quiet no longer owned me. I wasn't hiding in it. I was standing in it. And for the first time, I felt the shape of my own story take hold. Not defined by military ranks, or my family's disappointments, or the ghost of Curtis Vaughn trying to hang me with my own past, but by what I carried through it all. I'd been broken. I'd been erased. But I rebuilt. Not to prove them wrong, to prove me right. My sister and I don't talk every day. We're not suddenly bonded like some happy ending. We're two people still learning how to navigate the wreckage left by a family that mistook rigidity for love. But we're trying. Every few weeks, a message pops up. Sometimes a quote, sometimes a field manual she's studying. Once it was a picture of the silver badge sitting on her desk with a single-word caption, "Soon." She's not there yet, but she's looking in the right direction, and that means everything. A month ago, I went back to the house. Not for an event, not out of guilt. Just curiosity. The porch light still flickered. The driveway still cracked. My mother was trimming the hedges in silence. She didn't smile when she saw me, but she didn't look through me either. She said, You still wearing black?" I smiled. Not always. Inside, the slideshow from Carrara's last ceremony still sat on a paused screen in the corner of the living room. I didn't mention it, but I noticed something taped next to the monitor. A photo, faded, curled at the edges. Me. 18. In boots too big and a posture too stiff, laughing beside Carrara on the day I started basic training. I looked at it for a long time. Not because I missed that version of me, but because I forgave her. Some wounds don't scar cleanly. They echo. They hum like old radio frequencies, whispering lies when the world goes quiet. But healing isn't the absence of pain. It's knowing how to breathe through it, how to stand up anyway, how to leave the chair outside the family dinner and build your own table, your own space where you don't have to earn a seat. You are the seat. And if someone ever calls me a dropout again, I'll smile because they were half right. I dropped out of a life that asked me to be less than I am. And in doing so, I dropped into the life I was always meant to lead, in the shadows, in silence, and now finally, in the light.